Welcome to the second video on Lesson 6 for writing equations of lines. Sometimes we have to write the equation of a line based on a set of conditions. If you are given the slope and a y-intercept, then the work is easy. If you are given the slope and 1 point, then the work is a little bit harder. If you are given 2 points, the work is harder still. And finally, if you are given 1 point and parallel or perpendicular, that is when it is the hardest. But of course, really in geometry, parallel and perpendicular is the tie-in with our equations of our lines. Please know that every single time our answer will always be in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. So based on given the slope and the y-intercept, this is going to be the easiest because we're just able to plug it in. But you still need m and b. So if you're not given the y-intercept, instead you're given a point, you have to find it. You're not given the slope or the y-intercept, you have to find it. Same thing. So this is the easiest, working its way up to more challenging. Every single find the equation of the line problem follows these steps. First, you must determine the slope, and this would be depending on what information you are given. You'll use the lesson material from 4-5. Then you will plug m, x, and y into the slope-intercept form. So you will have a number in the y location, a number in for m, and a number in for x, and the only variable left will be b, so you can calculate that b value or the y-intercept. The only thing I will add to these steps that you can put in the right is that you want to make sure that you do write your final equation. The problem is not over when you calculate the y-intercept. You're not asked to find the value for b, you are asked to find the equation of a line. So please make sure you remember to write the final equation. So in taking a look at this example down here, it says find the equation of a line. We are given the slope and it passes through a point. So remember that we need the slope, and then we're going to plug in m, x, and y. So I am given the slope in this problem, so m equals -2. I'm given x and y, so x equals 1 and y equals 3, and I can plug those values into y equals mx plus b. So the only thing I will be missing is my b, which I can solve for. And now that I know b equals 5, and m equals -2, and b equals 5, I can plug in y equals -2x plus 5. You want to make sure that you write your final equation. Your final equation should have the x and y variables in it, because that represents the fact that you can have an infinite number of points on the line, but they all have to be connected using this slope, and they start at this y-intercept. So this is your final answer, y equals -2x plus 5, following these steps. So in this problem, we are once again given the slope. So slope, or m, equals 3/4, and we are given a point. So that means I know my x and my y value, and I can plug them in to y equals mx plus b in the y, m, and x spaces, and then I will end up solving for b and using that in my final equation. So when I solve for b, I get b equals 1, and remember that I need my m, which is 3/4, and my b to plug in for m and b in my final equation, so y equals 3/4 x plus 1. In this example, we are given 2 points, which simply means that we have more work to do for our slope, so we're going to need to use the formula we reviewed in Lesson 5 to calculate slope. And once again, I'm going to use my first point as my x1, y1, and my second point as my x2, y2, and calculate slope. So calculating, I got my slope value as 2, and then I'm going to pick a point to use. You can use either point for your x value and your y value, but you do have your m and then an x and a y, and you can do either choice, it doesn't matter. I am going to pick the second point, 2, 4, simply because it's all positive. So I will use x equals 2 and y equals 4, and I will plug those into y equals mx plus b and solve for b. So I got b equals 0, we have m equals 2, so if I look at my final answer, it'd be y equals 2x plus 0. We don't need this plus 0 here, so your final most simplified answer would just be y equals 2x. And in this example, the only thing that's extra tricky is the way the point is given to you. The x-intercept is a point, the y-intercept is a point. For every x-intercept, and if you're not familiar with this from algebra, you can always graph it. The x-intercept would be at 5, and the y-intercept is down here at -2. So the x-intercept value would be my x-coordinates, or sorry, my point for this would be 5, 0. And my y-intercept would be 0, -2. And so these are the values we will use when calculating the slope. So 5, 0, 0, -2, calculating the slope, we get 2/5. I'm going to use the 0.50 simply because it's positive. So this is my x and y value that I will use to calculate b. And then I will use the 2/5 and the -2 for m and b in my final answer. And now we have finally gotten to examples that really have to do with the geometry. We are trying to find something that passes through the point but is parallel to this line 4x plus 3y equals -2. Parallel means that we should have the same slope. So our job is to find the slope from this information and then use that slope and this x value and y value and go through the rest of the steps. The thing to notice here is that this 4x plus 3y equals -2 is not in slope-intercept form, so I actually have to do some work to get y by itself so that I can get my m value when it is in slope-intercept form. There's no way for us to simply look at that original equation and know what m equals. So I'm solving this equation into slope-intercept form, and when I have it here, I can see that my value for m is in front of the x is -4/3. So I will use m as -4/3 because since they are parallel, they are the same slope. I will use x equals 2 and y equals 9 to solve for b. So I get my y value, my value for b, my y-intercept is 11 2/3. My slope is -4/3. So y equals -4/3 x plus 11 2/3. Now we do have options with our fraction answer. You could leave it as this mixed number or write it as an improper fraction. Please do not round the decimal. We're going to leave it as a fraction. When we have a slope that is an improper fraction, we always want to leave it like that and not change it to a mixed number, because remember that slope represents rise over run. There's nothing involving a whole number in front, so we want to make sure that we leave it as a slope rise over run. Moving right along here, we have another example that passes through a point, so that is going to be my x and my y value, and we need to find m using the perpendicular relationship, which remember is opposite reciprocals. So the first thing I have to do, just like in the last problem, is solve this equation for y to get y equals 2x minus 1, and from here I can see that this slope is m equals 2, so the slope of my first line is m equals 2, but the opposite reciprocal would be -1/2. So I will use m equals -1/2, x equals 6, and y equals -3 to find the equation of the line that passes through this point but is perpendicular to this line. So we get b equals 0. So using m equals -1/2 and b equals 0, my final answer would be y equals -1/2 x. This particular problem had very little to do right at the beginning because the equation that it's perpendicular to was already in slope-intercept form. So my original slope was already 3, like I didn't have to do any work to find that. But since we wanted perpendicular, the slope that I will actually use in the equation is -1/3, so the opposite reciprocal. Plugging in the -1/3, the 9, and the 4 into slope-intercept form, solving for b, we get b equals 7. So the final equation is y equals -1/3 x plus 7. Please make sure you use the -1/3 slope. If you use the slope of 3, technically you have found a line that is parallel to this one, still going through this point, but it would be a parallel line instead of perpendicular. So please make sure you are using the -1/3, which is that opposite reciprocal slope. So this concludes the second part to lesson 6 about writing equations of lines. This one just makes them a little bit more challenging depending on the information that you are given. Also remembering to focus on parallel and perpendicular relationships with slopes, and that remembering that you need M and B to write an equation of a line, and you will use any tool in your toolbox to be able to calculate those things to be able to write your final answer.